Okay, so for our next panel, I kind of want to preface this before we get into it because, there's a tradition that we have at all the franchisors.com events, and that is we have this reputation of helping people understand how to use their money, how to acquire capital, all these things that you need in a lot of people and how they look at the ladder of becoming a franchisee and becoming a franchisor and becoming more successful. I honestly thought of no better person to be able to lead this conversation than somebody who obviously talks about it all the time, and Laura. And so I'm very, very excited for Laura to moderate this panel. We wanted to do something a little bit different than we do at Springboard. So show of hands for people who's here who have been to Springboard. Can we get that show of hands again, please? Okay, so a lot of you guys. Normally what we do with the lunch panel is that we get a bunch of PE folks and we get a bunch of investment bankers and all these folks that are within the institutional investor community, and they come up here and they basically explain how the process works. What I wanted to do today was get three people who have taken very different paths to capital and acquiring capital. Some maybe just from a family office, others through venture capital, and then one through a more traditional form of just typical PE, and talk about what they actually did with the money. Because that's something that we never hear about at all. We see this big number, and one of the things I know Laura is fascinated by is this exact notion as well. It's a question that she asked. It's a question that my team, when we're working with her, we tried to help her answer. And I think this is something you guys will find really interesting because people don't normally know the interworkings of this, and they don't normally share it. And so I wanted to make sure that we could do that today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Laura.
Thank you very much, Zach. So I'm Laura Michaels. I'm the editor-in-chief of Franchise Times Magazine, and I appreciate the wonderful panel that Zach organized for me to lead. He made my job really easy. As he said, 3 different founders and CEOs who went different routes with their decision to bring in outside capital. So we're going to talk about that. As Zach said, there's a lot of excitement that usually comes on the front end of some of these deals. But then when we revisit them 18 months, 2 years later, by the time things have settled down, the integration process has begun, the partnership is actually in motion, things can look very differently, and there's a lot of lessons that can be learned along the way. So we're going to get into that. So I've got to my left here, John Sparrow, who's the CEO and founder of Go Oil. And then continuing down the line, Michael Valenti, who's the CEO and founder of Renovation Cells. And then Andy Fuller, the CEO and founder of Mosquito Hunters. And so by way of further introduction, and we'll just go down the line here and start with you, John, tell us a little bit about your growth story and at what point you determined you needed to look for outside capital.
Yeah, Go Oil is the company I really didn't want to own when I started it. I had to build a company in 55 hours at a pitch competition, and we kind of ended up with Go Oil as like this mobile oil change company. Fast forward to 4 years of working with a franchise expert to kind of scale with bootstrapping, we needed to expand to the US, and we took on venture capital. So our current VCs, they built and started and scaled Hootsuite around the world. Fabulous guys, and we're also followed on by another venture firm. So we both raised about $800,000 to date in USD capital. We've given up about 13% of the company, so I still own a big chunk of it. And we're currently raising $5 million as we look to expand internationally. But basically, we only took on growth capital when we needed it to kind of expand.
Can I just follow up quickly? Was there an inflection point where you realized you did need it?
Yeah, I think we wanted to make sure that when we expand to the U.S. that we could do it the right way. We just didn't want to be in a position where we didn't have enough capital. Go Oil competes against another startup that's raised $130 million, and today we're the same size and we've raised a fraction. So through franchising, they did it corporately, obviously, but we just want to make sure we did it right. And I remember sitting there in the room with the investors, and they said, John, if money was an object, what are the 3 things you would do in the next 6 months? And I said, this, this, and this. And he's like, great. How much is it going to cost? Let's just get the check done and go for it.
Awesome. Michael?
So our growth was pretty explosive. We started franchising in 2020. We sold our first locations in 21, but we didn't sell one. We sold 4, and then we sold about 4 a month for the next year. And so we went from 0 locations in September of 21 to like 40 locations in the time of a year and a half. And so what that required was everybody wants to grow fast, but what fast growth requires is capital. And so, kind of our story was, and this was our first franchise. I'm a real estate and construction guy actually from Chicago that turned his real estate company or the construction company into a franchise business. And so we were first timers into the franchise space. And so we had this explosive growth and we had to figure out what to do. We had to figure out what to do quickly. And so I went the route of funding through angel investments, friends and family that believed in us, believed in our concept, and that's the route that we took for our capital.
Wonderful, thank you. And Andy, I know you have a different experience.
My experience is I started Mosquito Hunters in 2014. We started franchising in 2016. I started getting some calls from various potential investors out of the blue starting in 2016. And at first, it really wasn't something I was interested in. But what I saw was really an opportunity to gain intellectual capital. And what I realized is that the way that the best franchisors are built is with A-player franchisees. And to me, the most important thing for getting A-player franchisees was by working on a championship team on the franchisor side. To me, that meant ignoring my hubris, because I think that's ultimately the big Achilles for a lot of founders, but surrounding myself with a lot of people who are smarter than me, be it in marketing or finance, sales, operations, you name it. Rely on their collective intelligence and see that they have a vested interest in my success and the success of my brand.
And so I'm going to stick with you then, Andy, with this next question to dig a little bit deeper. So tell us a little bit about your approach to evaluating and understanding for you and your business what was the right deal structure and who was the right partner. You just mentioned, you were looking for kind of a strategic kind of component too, and not just the money.
Absolutely. It really wasn't my intention at the outset. My intention was to bootstrap originally until I realized just how much brain power could be at the disposal of Mosquito Hunters if we connected with the right people and partnered with the right people. And I came to realize that there are trade-offs that happen in any transaction, like period. Even if you're at a flea market, there's trade-offs that are happening. And so when you are talking about partnering with somebody, there's a trade-off. So I thought about what is most important to me. I'm going to have to give some things up, but what matters most to me? What mattered and what still matters most to me is independence and freedom and the ability to make decisions when I want to make decisions and not have to ask for anybody's permission. I worked in corporate America for many years. I was miserable. I started this business so that way I could have control of my own destiny. So no matter what, I didn't want to have to give that up. I wanted to work with people who I knew that I could trust and people who trusted me. So we actually had multiple offers on the table from different groups who wanted to invest into Mosquito Hunters. I didn't take the highest offer on the table. I took the offer of the people who had the best intellectual capital, from people who I knew that I wanted to work with in a setting where I knew that I would have all of the freedom that I wanted and needed, but also have the ability to ask for help when I needed help too.
And just to follow up on that, when you were thinking about the strategic needs of the business, did you have some areas in mind where you were looking for, the people that could bring that to the table in particular?
Yeah, I mean, the number one thing was franchising. I didn't have a franchising background. I didn't work for a franchisor beforehand. I didn't have any family or friends who had even been franchisees. So I joined the IFA. I started going to events like Springboard in as early as 2015 to learn as much as I could and build relationships, but I didn't have that firsthand franchising experience. And I knew that the only way I could make Mosquito Hunters a grade A franchisor offering, part of the fabric of home service brands in America is we had to have A-player franchisees. I would be significantly increasing the probability of attracting those A-player franchisees just by working with people who are very experienced in franchising altogether and all that entails.
Wonderful, thank you. Michael, so similar question to you in terms of how you went about evaluating what was out there before knowing that you wanted to go more of the angel investor route.
Yeah, I mean, I evaluated for a long time, and it's always a consistent evaluation. We were approached early in the process with a kind of boutique private equity partner that wanted to come in with us, that believed in our concept. We took a real hard look at them. I think, for me, and sometimes this is, I'm stubborn to a fault, but, what comes with private equity and some other bringing on other people is control. And in the early stages for us, we knew where we needed to go. We knew this type of business segment that we had created. There weren't a lot of people out there doing it, and a lot of the piece was control. Now, my stance on that has changed over time, right, as you get into it. But in the early days, when you bring on those partners, you do have to bring people in that you have to answer to. So that was part of it. I think the secondary part of it is, I kind of grew up in the Chicago, not grew up, but have been here for a long time. So I was well connected, at least connected enough in the real estate industry. That was the business that we brought to market. And I had a lot of people that I had known already that believed in us. So when you're talking to people and, we're constantly pitching ourselves, right, as founders, talking about our business and our brand, and people constantly kept saying, we love what you're doing, we love what you're doing. If you ever need money, come find me. And so when I needed money, I went and started having those conversations. And so, while I think to Andy's point, we could have learned a lot, and, people before you, we were just like, look, we're going to do this now. We know where we need to go. We were very steadfast on what the direction needed to be. And because we were backed up by some really good friends and family, and these were people I went to college with, so like best friends, my immediate family, people that really knew us, that's who we reached out to for first. Now, that comes with a caveat, because now there's a lot more pressure. If this does go down, and I'm someone confident, if somebody says, are you going to fail? I kind of look at them cross-eyed, like, no, failure is not an option. But, if this does not make it, my best friends, my parents, my friends and family who I've known for a long time, I have to answer to them. And so there's a level of stress that comes with that. That motivates me. So I take that every day to know that I've taken some pressure capital from people and I have to perform. But, I think like Andy said, there's trade-offs all different directions. There's no one way to do this. It was just the route that we went. I was fortunate that we had some people that really believed in us and our concept.
Wonderful. And John, I think when we did our prep call, you told me you were 25 years old when you started Go Oil. Is that right?
Yeah, well, it's 7. I'm 29 now, so a little younger, maybe like 23 or
Okay,
something, yeah.
so even younger. And I think you said at the time that sort of the traditional kind of banking landscape, or even PE at that point, just wasn't really an option. And so what led you to evaluate venture capital, and how was the deal structure set up for you? Because I know you've done it a little bit differently.
Yeah, I started my first business at 16, so credit wasn't really a thing. I always had to build with the cash in the bank. There's no overdraft, you hit zero, oh my God, you hit zero. There's no support. So I've always built my businesses with that kind of mindset. So when I got to building Go Oil, I remember sitting there, and Kelly, that's my team, she's been franchising for 30 years now. And she looked at me and she's like, you're not going to build this corporately. You have no credit, you have no capital, you have no way of doing this. And I said, yeah, I just don't know how I'm going to do it. She's like, well, you're going to do it through franchising, because you're going to use other people's credit. You're going to build a good business, and you're going to have micro businesses starting everywhere, and you're really good at building the brand. So we figured out we could sell our first 30 plus franchises, and now we're well over 400. When we found what worked, and I was sitting there and we're going through a program, an accelerator, and we're around other founders that were raising money. And our original investor, Ryan, that owns Hootsuite, he's like, John, you guys make money, and you just need money to get to that next step. You're scared to go to the US, stop being scared. And it was when we were let's just go for it. Our goal at Go Oil was always we want to build the world's largest mobile service network in the automotive space. And we want to be able to give franchisees an opportunity to make extremely good money. And we kind of described how that franchisee needs to operate. We want them to take home anywhere from $80,000 to $160,000 a year personally. So we need to build a business around that so they can build a lifestyle. And we need the capital to test marketing. We need the capital to test equipment and different service offerings in different regions. So that growth capital is money we'd never normally spend. So we needed it to test out.
Thinking about, sticking with just this idea of the evaluation process, were there any, resources, whether that was, just people or just other sources of information that you found to be most helpful as you were trying to evaluate what was the right option? How did you learn, essentially, about the different financing options that are out there?
Yeah, so venture capital is very different. You can have a startup that does zero revenue and raise $5 million at a $50 million valuation. It's a different world. I guess investors are more looking at where the company can be in 5 to 6 years. And I would say it's more closer to gambling than anything. They'll bet on 10 companies. They really hope that 2 of them pay back the whole portfolio, and then they kind of make a return. So it's risky, but if you do it right, like if you invested in Uber early on, like fantastic for you, but there's a lot of them that do fail. So venture capital is risk averse. Like, you know, we've been approached by PE firms and they're like, hey, like we're gonna buy half your business. I'm like, I don't want the restriction. We gotta grow, and we want equity left for employees. We want equity left for additional investors if we have to pivot. I just don't want to go and slow down yet. So that's why we went with the venture capital side, but more so on a convertible note side. So traditional VC is more raised on a safe. Safe you can kind of claim at any time. We did a convertible note, so we have an option to buy out our investors at usually 2 to 3 times their investment. So we have that control and ability as we go through our growth stage.
Awesome. And that flexibility, yeah, is something that, you know, not everybody knows about. And so, you know, Michael and Andy, same question to you in terms of just how you learned about the different options that were out there, and then if you could tell us a little bit about some of the specifics of your structure.
Yeah, are there any Vistage members out here? If you can you guys raise your hand? 1, 2, 3. Okay, there's 3 of us. If you guys don't know what Vistage is, it was the best thing that I've done. It's a group of like-minded or, you know, other owners of companies. It's essentially a round table where you get together and you share the ideas with the basis that everybody in the room is just there to help you. And so again, I go back, I'm a real estate and construction guy that found himself in franchising that was growing a fast-run business. I didn't know what a convertible note was. I didn't know what a safe was. I didn't know the difference between venture capital and private equity. You know, I knew how to build things. I knew how to put together real estate deals. I knew that side of things. And so, you know, I think the first is understanding as owners that you don't know what you don't know. You know, if you think you know everything and you're trying to do this for the first time, you're wrong. And I think that's the easiest way to run your company into the ground. And so a lot of my learnings came from that group. There was a lot of smart individuals there. And I said, look, here's my needs. Here's what I need to get done. What do I do? And, you know, I found the smartest guy in the room who was in real estate who has done this. And he told me, do this. He literally said, go raise a convertible note. And I said, well, what's a convertible note? He told me, and then I talked to the attorneys. So long story short, where I'm going with this is, I think if you guys are serious about your business, you should get involved in some group or some sort of round table of people that can help you. If not, don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call, right? Entrepreneurship and what we do sometimes is lonely. And what I mean by that is that there's no door to knock on when we have a problem. We are the door if we're the top of the food chain, right? So being able to know who you can call, feeling confident in those decisions and saying, look, I don't know what I'm doing, what do I do? I think is really important. Don't have that ego. Take that ego away and then learn from people above you. And this community is an extremely friendly community that I found. I've been here for a couple years. Anybody in this room will pick up the phone and answer your question and try to help you without question. And so to the point of how did I learn, I asked. I didn't let ego get in my way, and I asked tons of questions, and you know, it took a long time to figure this out. What's a convertible note? What's a safe? What's the structure? How does that look like when we exit? There's lots of questions around that you know, we don't know the answers to, but I trusted in the people that were around me, and that's the direction we went.
Awesome. Andy?
So for us, Mosquito Hunters is a part of Happy Nest. Happy Nest is a platform. It includes Lawn Doctor, which is a lawn care company. It includes EcoMaids, which is residential home cleaning company, and then Sparkle Squad, an elite window cleaning, which it's a window cleaning brand. They also do gutter cleaning. All of Happy Nest resources, well, a large portion of the resources come from a group called C&L Strategic Partners. And why this made sense for me is C&L is interested in hanging on to assets for a while and playing the long game. And there were some others that were in the mix early on who I was having conversations with that seemed to be more in the flipping business, where they wanted to build something really quickly and then recapitalize. And that really didn't make sense to me. And I started this in my basement. I started this with a single backpack sprayer. It was very, and still is very important to me that Mosquito Hunters, again, becomes part of the fabric of home service brands in America. I wanted to do this the right way, and so CNL Strategic Partners was the right partner for us because they're in the business of hanging on to assets for a while versus some others.
When you think about the different structures and the options that are out there now, all knowing what you know, are there some things that you could impart to our audience, what they should be thinking about in terms of gauging what is right for them, questions that they might not be thinking about quite yet, just to ask themselves?
Yeah, I would say what Mike said was brilliant. I think talk to as many people as you can. Ask someone who you think is smarter than you to be a mentor. Someone who's gone down the path you want to go down. You'd be shocked how many people who are uber successful will give you their time. So ask a lot of questions, and I'd say don't pretend to be smarter than you are. And if you don't know what something is, like a convertible note, say, what is a convertible note? You actually gain a lot of power in a conversation by doing that. I've seen founders make themselves look foolish when they try to talk in a certain way and elevate their game as if they're somebody who they're not, because the people who play the private equity game, they can sniff you out in about 2 seconds. So just be authentic and ask a lot of questions.
Yeah, I'd say in some respect, know the legal language in your notes and stuff that you guys are raising, and have a basic, financial acumen. And I mean that because it's hard sometimes we structure these deals up front today that don't hit until 5 years from now, and you're trying to project what your business is going to do. If, then, what next? And so, having people around you, good attorneys that can draft good language, if you're doing it on your own, that can review language from VCs or private equity companies, and then, even a CFO, if you need to help build financial models, is something that we had to learn on the fly. I could always handle a basic spreadsheet, but when you start to get into more complex forecasting, most of us in this room, that's not something that we're really good at. And so, you can work with people part-time, but really understand the legal aspect of what you're signing. These, like our franchise agreements that are 180 pages, some of these deals, are 40 pages long. What in the world's in that, and what does that mean 5 years from now? So getting good counsel around legal and finance and understanding what the future looks like when those deals are executed, I think is important while structuring a deal up front.
I'm sure each of you would say your franchisees better be reading their franchise agreements and their FDDs in their entirety, and you should be doing the same as franchisors when you're looking at these different deal structures. John?
Yeah, I'll make it simple. There's two things. When you're raising capital, most investors, something I've learned, because I'm also I'm also investing in other VC firms with money I've been able to make now, but at the end of the day, we're betting on the founder, not necessarily the idea. Do I think this person is that person that's going to lead this company to it? A VC might be pitched on 6 different window washing companies or pressure water, whatever it is. It might be similar to they've heard the pitch, but it all comes down to the founder and the team, right? And that's something I would really highlight, and something we highlight every time we go to raise. It's this is the team, this is our history, this is how we execute, this is how we do it. The other piece is the company is not you and you're not the company. And I say that because when you're going into these deals, have your own counsel outside the company. The company has its own counsel. You yourself, with your own equity and shares, has your own counsel to watch out for you, because you may really want to go sign that deal, and that may be great for the company, but horrible for you personally. So I always say to founders that are raising, have personal counsel that's not the same law firm, different law firm. Have your company have its own counsel, just as that double check and balance as you're going through these raising. Like you said, you're looking at all these legal documents. Have that personal counsel go through it for your position within your own equity. So.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that's a great point. And so, we've got Shark Tank coming up a little bit later this afternoon, where people are going to be up here pitching investors, and you each have talked about some of the inbound interest that you had from investors. But what did you do to prepare, to make the business case for your company when you were, either kind of having those introductory conversations or going through the negotiation process? What was important for you to feel like you were ready to be in that room?
I'll make this very quick. Especially in franchising, you're pulled in a lot of different ways. If you're out there, right now we're raising $5 million to help with our international stuff, it's a full-time gig. I have to be removed from the franchise operations. I am pulled back in to open some new cities that are required, but I'm to my team, leave me alone, I need to go raise. It's a full-time gig. You're probably going to pitch 150, 250 different investors. You're going to be on planes, you're going to be in rooms, you're going to be doing a lot of work. And the investors you meet today, they may turn you down now, but doesn't mean they're going to turn you down at your next like 3 or 4 different stages, right? Like, I was told by an investor last week, they're like, we write $50 million checks. We like you. Make it so we can write you a $50 million check and come back. But resources are open to you. So yeah, I would just say like it's a full-time gig to raise money. It's not easy. It's a lot of rejection. 3 years ago we got told we're going to die because of EVs, and then now EVs are dying. So like, it's a weird world, and it's a full-time gig.
Yeah, agreed. Raising is hard. It takes a lot of time, energy, and lots of no's. People, who tell you, and oh my God, I love it, and then you follow back up and they, oh, sorry, I can't do it. So, it is a full-time job. I think as far as things, again, these are things that I had to learn. What's a pitch deck? That's the first thing they're going to want to see, and a lot of people in this room may not know what that looks like or put that together before. What's a pro forma? These are things that you have to learn to be able to put together to present. So pitch deck and pro forma is something that you need to have that's comprehensive. That's, these venture capitalists and private equity guys and any investor is looking at, similar decks all day long. So there's a cadence, there's kind of a way that you present them. And these are things that I had to learn and my team had to learn on the fly to get this done. I think to the point too with, if there's a $50 million investor, and these are things that we're still learning, right? And that we did last year is, put together investor updates. Even if they didn't invest in you, put together something that shows what your company is doing, where you're at. Hey, we crossed $1 million this year. And next year you cross $10 million, and then that $50 million investor will show back up and say, I'm ready. So keeping in touch with all the people that you do come in contact with in some capacity to explain what you're doing on a regular basis, even if you don't hear from them, I think makes it easier to get money in the future, because you're going to have different stages. What have I learned about running a business? It always takes longer and costs more money than you think. And so you may raise 500 a day and say, I'm done, I'm never raising again. And then 6 months later, oh shit, I need another 5. And so you just keep that in mind.
I agree with everything you guys have said. I guess what I might add to that also is I really had to make sure that I was bringing my A game to the negotiating table and made sure that I really was negotiating in the best interest of the company, but also in a skillful way, understanding that the people at the other side of the table are going to be my partners at the end of this transaction if it goes the way I want it to. So I would recommend to anybody, if you haven't read it, Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. It's the best book on negotiating I've ever read. I would highly recommend that one. I would also say everybody knows the devil is in the details. Really good deals are made or lost in the 11th hour. There's this moment where everybody's ready to put the pencils down. Everybody's exhausted. You're exhausted. You just want it to be over with one way or the other. And something's going to happen, totally unexpected, that could screw up your deal and make it less advantageous for you. And so I would just say make sure that you're staying gritty in those moments, paying attention and making sure all the way through that you're looking out in the best interests of your brand and for yourself. Don't get deal fever. Don't be afraid to walk away at the very last second if it's not the right deal.
And, so you did a great segue into my next question, which is, priorities for negotiating and just, what those deal trade-offs can be and what, learning what you're comfortable with, as the founder and the owner. So talk a little bit about that process for you and how you went about evaluating and understanding what your long-term goals were to then, find the right partner that would help you achieve them.
Yeah, it had to be trust. It was the most important thing. So thinking again about that negotiation table, somebody who I can negotiate with skillfully, but somebody who I know that I can trust. It really is like a marriage. I know it's commonly said in franchising that your relationship with your franchisees, each one is like a marriage. That is absolutely true. It is even more intensively like a marriage if you have partners as a franchisor. And so I would say trust your instincts. Trust your instincts, and if you get the feeling that this is somebody who you're really going to want to work with long-term for years and years and years, then it's probably a good idea to continue the conversations. But if you have the slightest little thought in the back of your mind, say, I don't know if I would like hanging out with this person. I don't know if I would like having a beer with this person. I don't know if I would like having dinner with this person when they come into Chicago or wherever you live. Maybe it's not the right deal. So I'd say trusting instincts was probably the most important thing.
Yeah, I agree with the trust part. I mean, once you ink these deals, they're really hard to unwind, right? And especially once the money hits your bank account, I mean, that's kind of, you've made your bed. And so, we're a little different because we don't have venture capital or private equity. I have friends and family. I was lucky, and, my favorite investors were, here's 250 grand, I'll never contact you. Okay, great, that's awesome. That's what I want, right? So, it was people that we knew that we could trust, people that we knew that weren't really going to bother us. They believed, they almost believed more in us than they believed in anything else. And I think a lot of investors will say we bet on the management team, we bet on the people, not necessarily the business. Now, the business matters, but they believed in us, so they left us alone, and they still leave us alone. We actually have to reach out to them to say, here's what we're doing. I haven't even received one call in 2 years of, hey, what's going on? Which is nice. But the trust factor is important. For sure, and know who you're getting in business with, because you are making these people business partners. And I think the final thing, I would say it's a lot easier and more advantageous for you to raise ahead of time versus if you get yourself in a corner. Because if you get yourself in a corner, you're going to make a deal that you may not want to make.
Yeah, like at the end of the day, you could be sitting across the table from somebody that may have more leverage in your business, and you may get fired as the CEO. You may be the founder, but you may not be running a company. I say to founders all the time, I'm like, you may be a good startup founder that's running this company to a certain scale. Then the company gets to a certain scale, it really is not you. Like, for example, I'm very clear with our investors. I'm saying, like, look, I've never taken a company public. It's our goal to get there. We're about 4 or 5 years away from being able to do that. But I'm not the CEO to take it public. And they know that when they're investing, that there's a horizon on me being the CEO, and there's a opportunity to bring in somebody, and they see the clear path of where we want to go as a company, and realizing, again, like I said before, the company is not me and I'm not the company. So at the end of the day, my goal is to see this grow into what we really want to see it be, is this massive worldwide organization. And I will either replace myself or hire people. If the founding team that runs with us today needs to be replaced, we'll do that, because in the betterment of the company and the betterment of the franchisees and the betterment of the investors and shareholders. So.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you. So one of the questions that I love to ask, always, I like to zero in on, the challenges, because I think we learn the most through the challenges and hearing from other people's challenging experiences. And so just thinking back on each of your journeys, is there something that you wish you would have done differently, that if you could go back and, unwind it, that you would? That would maybe be a good lesson for our audience? Maybe, do you want to just start, John?
Sure. I say that all of our mistakes are education. I try not to bring up as education. Like, the biggest hit that we got is when we were early on, we had, these developers from a school, and we brought them in internally. And, as all startups do, is we weren't raising yet, and we're just starting to start the raising process. And, we had to pull back on funding, and they turned around and sold our software for $500,000 illegally. And we decided not to pursue it legally. And we were at our lowest point, and we were able to bring in those investment checks. I would want to unwind that, but I would say that it was the biggest lesson that we needed to learn at the time. And to be fair, it's a lesson I didn't learn earlier in my career, with like a bit of a blind trust with somebody that's in charge of pretty integral part of your business. So wouldn't unwind anything, but being more vocal about those things earlier on, it was something I would change, but it was a good lesson for us to learn. So,
yeah, I think for us, I mean, how many lessons I've learned, part of the angel route that I took was, I bet on myself and went alone with my team without franchise professionals, that were vested in our business. And so with that came a lot of, autonomy where we could do whatever we want, but how much money we spent on things that didn't work because we didn't have, franchise veterans by our side. And listen, I'm not someone as an owner, and I think a lot of you guys can probably relate to this. Like, I don't look back much and beat myself up over it. I'm a very forward-thinking person. I don't lose a ton of sleep, but I do learn. And, if there's one thing we learned is that, you really need to be, I even talked to somebody on my team, and they said, anybody else we're going to hire from now on has got to be in the franchising business. I'm tired of dealing with these outside vendors that think they know franchising. They don't. That's just an example of, sometimes you spend money on things that you think are going to work, and they don't. And so there's an element of waste. Now, we don't have control, with boards, and we don't have people to answer to, but at the end of the day, I write the checks, and are you spending that money efficiently? And as someone who didn't come from the franchising space, we had some waste. And so if I could go back, there's a lot of external partners or programs that we thought were going to work that didn't work, and I'd love to have those dollars back.
If you want to build your house out of bricks as a franchise organization, you have to have A-level franchisees. That's my biggest lesson in franchising altogether. I joined the IFA in 2015. I went to tons and tons of IFA events. I went to Springboard. I met a ton of smart people in franchising. I heard that advice from others often, and I thought I was taking it to heart. In hindsight, I could have done even more to take that to heart. And what I didn't realize that I know now is by taking on some outside capital, what I was really doing without realizing is I was buying a higher bar. I was buying the ability to say no. And this goes back to the FranDev conversation that was happening on stage yesterday, led by Ryan Comby. It's so important to know who to say no to, because most people aren't going to be a good fit for your franchise system. When you're bootstrapped, you feel a lot of pressure to bring people on because you have bills you need to pay, and you need those license fees, and you need a story to tell so that way you can get more franchisees on board and build momentum, et cetera, et cetera. When you have outside capital, you have the ability to say no in a more powerful way than you ever did before. And it's just so critical, especially early on, your first 10, 20, 30 franchisees, you don't let a single bad egg into the group. Build A players so that way you can truly make your business sustainable and viable.
I just have one follow-up on that, and again, we went alone, so this is just things of learnings that I've learned, right? And I had someone in my business group, he said, I was always in the early stages against bringing on some other outside people for the control issue. And I remember them sitting me down and saying, Mike, 100% of nothing is nothing. And that resonated with me. And I still took internal, we didn't go exterior, but today it's like I'd much rather be at some point partnered with a group that brings the intellectual capital that can, 25% of $100 million is better than 100% of $10 million or whatever it is, so just keep that in mind, in the early stages. And listen, these are not easy decisions. When you guys have created your business, when you put and you founders in here know this, right? Every hour and minute is spent agonizing over the next decision. These decisions aren't easy. And you can go many different directions, and they're especially hard when you haven't been there before, right? But just keep in mind, if you can find right partners and people that can help fuel your growth and give you that intellectual knowledge, I think that is important, because 100% of nothing is nothing.
Well, let's spend a few minutes talking about how you've put your capital to work and what have been some of the important investments that you've made, as you've brought on additional funding. John, do you want to start with that?
Externally or internally? Like internally?
Well, both.
Both?
I mean, yep. Just where have you deployed this money? Where has it been most impactful?
Yeah, so within the company, any venture capital we bring in, we have a term it's only for growth. We can't sustain operations. Operations should fund itself. We should only be investing and testing with it. So that's what we've done it internally. But on the personal side, where I'm from, we have a syndicate, and it's a bunch of other founders that have sold companies or running companies, and we all put in $5,000 twice a year, and we have 20 companies pitch, and we always invest in the top company. If we feel like putting more money, we do in, and it's like communities like this to get together. You get, 10 guys all put $5,000 in, and even with Shark Tank, right, there could be an actual $50,000 to $150,000 check go into a company. That avoids these startups, and even in franchising, taking a bad franchisee, being able to say no, being more responsible in the early days of franchising. So I try and help out the younger ones with some of my benefits from capital, but internally it's spent on only growth, development, and helping our franchisees.
Yeah, we had to build our system, we had to build the plane while flying it. And so because we just took off and had this explosive growth that we weren't prepared for, we wanted it, so it wasn't something that it was super exciting, But part of, when you don't sell one, you sell four, and then you start selling four a month, and all of a sudden you have, 10 franchisees in 6 months, and you haven't built a training program, or you haven't built systems, or you haven't built process. Holy shit, you got to do something. And so our money went to, internal, mostly employees, to help build what we needed to build. We needed marketing decks. We needed a training system. We needed a variety of things. And oh, by the way, we knew validation was really important. So I needed a good support structure because we needed to keep up the turn of people coming through the door. And our opinion was always that, listen, if we have great support and the franchisees, feel really supported, then that will then in turn help with the validation side, which will keep up the growth. And so, for 2 years, we put a lot of money into almost out hiring ourselves. Now that comes at a cost, and there's a lot of companies that say, well, don't do that, only put it towards growth, don't put it towards, but that's growth. We just had to, that's what we had to do. And then once you build the plane, our plane is now built, you start to scale back because, franchising is a beautiful thing where the longer the franchisees are in business, in some respects, some of you may disagree with this, but the less support they need, right? So we built the machine, we can confidently hand our business to that franchisees. I don't need as many people today as I almost did 2 years ago while we were trying to figure out what in the world we were doing. But again, we were doing this alone, so we did it just what felt natural to us.
We put the capital towards bringing on A-player support. Franchise business advisors are the backbone of a franchise system, and so it enabled us to get the best and brightest coaches we could possibly get. Business intelligence tools, so that way we could monitor performance of franchisees, give them scorecards so they can see how they're doing day to day. That was a lot of work, a lot of resources putting that together. A number of other things. I'd say one of the biggest things was building an in-house call center. We did that within months of the deal. And there's a reason why most franchisors don't offer an in-house call center to their franchisees, and that's because it's really, really, really hard and really expensive to build. And it's been a journey, but it's one of our superpowers with Happiness. We can provide that to our franchisees. We can quote and close customers on the phone within a matter of minutes. And that's just something that franchisees can't get, working with an independent franchisor.
And Zach hasn't waved at me yet, so I have no idea where we're at in terms of time, so I'm just gonna keep going unless I'm... 5 minutes. Oh, there you are. So I'm just gonna, I'll ask one more question, and then if you have questions from the audience, please raise your hand here in just a moment. But thinking about the future of your business and your role in it, has that changed in, the last couple of years, or have you always had, sort of the end goal in mind? Tell me a little bit about how you've, thought about what an eventual exit might look like and how that played into your decision making in terms of bringing in a partner.
Yeah, so my friends, they built and sold a company called Skip in Winnipeg, and they sold for well over 250 million. And I always joked, I said, we'll sell for more. We'll always sell for more. You have that title today, but we're gonna destroy that title. Definitely well on the way to do that. We're definitely leaning towards the public side unless big OEM wants to come play ball. For me, I'm mostly on the investor relations side, raising, working with franchisees on new locations. I'm removed from operations. We have a great COO that's taken over to do all that kind of stuff in our franchise program. I see my time with the company in 2 to 3 years more going into a board role as the company continues to scale. Just understanding that and being sober about it. Enjoying the experience as we continue to scale.
I think for us, at some point we will bring on a professional partner that knows how to operate, that's played in this space, that can really bring us to the next level. I keep saying we're newer, we're just a couple years, but we've got something special, and it would be great to partner with someone that has deep pockets and some of the knowledge that we don't have that can help, propel us to the future and make us a viable brand, moving forward. I think as the role of the CEO and founder now, I think somebody said it earlier, not all founders and CEOs are meant to lead a national franchise business. That's just the progression. We're meant to found companies, we're scrappy, we get what to do, we can work on the fly, but can we run 100 units?
We do well in gray.
We do well, and that's exactly right. I always say black and white, what's that? Give me the gray. We do really well in gray, a lot of us, and that's where we function well. So, to where my position goes, I don't know, but I know I don't know what I don't know. I don't have enough ego around my business to say I have to be the CEO. It doesn't mean much. I'd rather see this business be successful. If I need to be replaced at some point and move to, a board or do strategic stuff, like that's fine. And so I think understanding and not holding on to something that you're not meant to do. We were meant to found and start up companies, but we may not be meant to lead, 100 or 200 unit national franchise business. It's just different. So.
Yeah, I'm very similar, entrepreneur through and through. Building things is what makes me feel alive, and at a certain point, it's going to make sense for me to fire myself and put somebody better suited for the role. And as the CEO of a 200, 300 unit franchise operation, what I know is I love building things and I love working with small business owners. And so I think there's a lot of different paths I could take, but in the meantime, I want to build this as big as I can to the best of my abilities.
And do we have a few minutes for questions?
2 questions.
2 questions only, if we have them. Otherwise, I can certainly keep going.
Full disclosure, I work for a family office private equity firm, but I feel like one of the big misunderstandings or questions I get around the difference between a convertible note and private equity, or I guess I would say like 3 of the big topics I feel like there's a misunderstanding around would be headline valuation, multiples, or values of the convertible note, expiration dates, and where the money actually goes. So I was just curious, would any of you have anything to share that you kind of learned across value, expiration date of a note, or where the money goes that you would wish you would have known back then?
We joined a LOI accelerator for like if you're under 30 and building a company, like they kind of go through that training. I think some of the VCs that I run into, they ask like, do you understand this, or you should watch this YouTube video, like simple as that, before we have our next conversation, because it's almost like they're trying to be friendly but also screw you at the same time. It feels weird, weird dating with them sometimes. But yeah, at the end of the day, like I understand it, but I say there's a lot of founders and like traditional business guys that don't. Like they just think like, oh, you're private equity, you're gonna come buy my company, and then they're like, oh, I want 2x on my business, and you're like, yeah, no problem, here's the check. Like where they probably could have got quite a bit more depending on how their business is evaluated. So yeah, join like EO or join like an accelerator, or talk to a startup founder that's raised like 40 to 60 million or 5 million, and just pick their brain. That's what I would say. And then on the venture side, like on the other side of the table, because I sit on that side of the table as well, it's a fair question to ask a founder, like, do you understand this? And if you don't, I'm happy to go through it with you, because I just don't want you to be uncomfortable with this situation.
On our side, because it was private, the biggest, advice I could give you guys is, honestly, you can structure the deal however in the world you want to structure it. If you can sell it, then God bless you, go sell it. So, that's the private side. When you deal with the venture capitals and the private equity, they have certain structures that they want to hit and the way they invest. But for us, we just created up, I didn't put a valuation cap in some of my notes, and people, well, I want a value cap. And I was like, no value cap. And I got it, and that means they wanted it, not to exceed number of X. And I always thought our business would be more. And so I sold all my notes with no value cap, which some professional investors really did not like. And I heard a lot of no's from the pros that were like, well, I want a value cap. And I was like,
I'll give you
not
$1.
going to happen.
I'll give you $1 at $1 billion valuation. Now your company's worth $1 billion.
Yeah, I would just say kind of what I was saying earlier is just be authentic. Don't try to be somebody who you're not. Ask questions. If you try and pretend to speak the language, someone like Caroline's going to sniff you out very quickly, and you're going to actually put yourself at a disadvantage. So and this goes back to that Chris Voss book I was talking about, just ask questions and make the other side do some heavy lifting. How would that work? Explain to me what that would look like. Explain it to me like I'm a 5th grader. And if you ask those questions, it's actually going to be a lot more productive of a conversation, and you can get to what is most important to you.
Just one last thing. If you're raising, the question I always ask the VCs, because I think founders forget to ask, is like, Number one is like, what's their intention with the fund? Like, what type of returns they're looking for? Is this a 16x return? When are they wanting the yield to be? Like, are they looking at 5 or 6 years? The biggest question I also ask is like, how much of the funds have you deployed? If it's a $10 million fund, like, are you 50% of the way through? Like, how much of that fund are you hitting for reserve? Because it sucks when you go into an investor conversation and they're like, yeah, we deployed 65% of our capital. And I'm like, so why are we having a conversation? Because you're going to hold back the rest of it. Because how VC works is they'll invest 40 to 60% of the funds, and then they'll hold back the rest because the bets they placed, if they're doing well enough, they want to double down and like protect their equity stake. And the ones that fail and go into liquidation, whatever, right? But so just asking that question, or they'll be like, yeah, we're just getting our LPs to like commit, and it's like, okay, well, let me know when they commit, and we can have a conversation. So just respect your time, but I think a lot of founders don't ask VCs and family offices enough questions. Ask a lot.
But you guys may not know to ask those questions. That's the problem. You may sit at the table and feel uncomfortable asking those, So part of this has to come with learning. I didn't know those questions to ask. How would I know? So just you got to seek out people to talk to about what to ask.
But what you don't realize is they're expecting that you don't know that. So it's okay. Like, you don't have to worry about looking stupid for asking those questions because they already know that they know more about this space than you.
If you guys don't know, ask. And that's anything you do in business, right? Like, please don't think that. I think that's the big one takeaway I want you guys to leave. Like, if you don't know the answer, you're not supposed to know everything. Just ask somebody in this community, they'll help you.
Yep, absolutely.
Not always natural for a founder.
Okay, I'm getting the axe motion here from Zach, so we'll wrap up. Thank you so much to John, to Michael, to Andy. Lots of knowledge up here. Are you guys all sticking around if people have questions? Yeah, they're more than willing to share, so thank you.